March 15, 1944, 7:23 in the morning. Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio. The envelope arrived by courier. Classified. Red stamp across the seal. Lieutenant Colonel Thornton Aldrich stood at his desk in Building 11, the engineering offices at Wright Aeronautical Corporation. Outside, the sound of radial engines being test-fired rolled across the tarmac like distant thunder. Aldrich was 46 years old, 22 years designing aircraft engines. His hands were scarred from sheet metal, stained permanently with oil that no soap ever quite removed. He looked like a man who had spent his life around machinery because he had. The envelope was thin, maybe 20 pages. The cover sheet read, Technical Intelligence Report. Captured enemy analysis. Eyes only. He slit it open with a letter opener shaped like a propeller blade. A gift from his wife years ago, when things like that still seemed clever. The first page was a memo from Army Air Forces Intelligence. Brief, direct. Subject, Japanese technical assessment of American aircraft engines. Source documents recovered from Imperial Japanese Navy Technical Research Facility, Tokyo, during intelligence operation February 1944. Aldrich turned the page. The report was typed, translated from Japanese. 47 pages of technical analysis, measurements, calculations, diagrams. The kind of meticulous documentation that engineers recognized instantly as serious work. He scanned the introduction. Then he stopped. Read it again. Slower. Analysis of captured Pratt & Whitney R-1830 Twin Wasp radial engine serial number 167734, recovered from B-24 Liberator aircraft, downed December 1943. Purpose of examination: determine manufacturing methods, materials, composition and design, philosophy of American aviation propulsion systems. The next paragraph hit differently. Initial inspection reveals American manufacturing techniques crude by all accepted standards of precision engineering. Surface finishes rough. Tolerance is excessive. Assembly methods indicate mass production priority over component optimization. Detailed analysis follows. Aldrich set the report down. He walked to the window, looked out at the runway where a B-25 was taxiing engines, roaring propellers, cutting the cold March air into visible spirals. Crude. The word sat in his mind like a stone. He had designed those tolerances. Personally. In 1939. Sitting in a conference room not 500 yards from where he stood, now arguing with production engineers about what was possible and what was necessary. He picked up the phone, dialed extension 447. Merrick. Doug, it's Thornton. I need you in my office, now. On my way. Captain Douglas Merrick arrived 3 minutes later. 30 years old, sharp production specialist. He had the kind of mind that could look at a blueprint and immediately see how it would fail on an assembly line. Aldrich valued that. Most design engineers lived in theoretical perfection. Merrick lived in the real world of jigs and fixtures and workers who had been farm kids 6 months ago. What's the emergency? Merrick asked, closing the door. Aldrich handed him the report. Read the introduction. First 3 pages. Merrick sat. Read. His expression changed halfway through page 2. By page 3 he was frowning. Well, Merrick said slowly, they're not wrong. We do use looser tolerances than keep reading. Merrick turned to page 4. The technical analysis section. Detailed measurements of cylinder bore diameter, crankshaft journal dimensions, valve stem clearances, bearing surfaces. Every measurement precise to 4 decimal places. Next to each American measurement a comparison. Japanese engine specifications. Their tolerances. Their surface finishes. The differences were stark. American cylinder bore tolerance plus or minus 0.0015 inches. Japanese cylinder bore tolerance plus or minus 0.002 inches. American connecting rod bearing clearance 0.02 to 0.004 inches. Japanese connecting rod bearing clearance 0.005 to 0.0010 inches. Surface finish measurements showed the same pattern. American parts were rougher. Machining marks visible under inspection. Castings that looked rushed. Welds that would never pass Japanese quality control. Merrick looked up. They're saying we build sloppy engines. Keep reading, Aldrich said. Merrick continued. Page 7, page 8. Then he stopped. Read a paragraph twice. Looked at Aldrich with confusion. This doesn't make sense. Aldrich nodded. Read it out loud. Merrick cleared his throat. Engine operational log recovered from aircraft indicates 8 from 47 flight hours since manufacture. 0 recorded mechanical failures, 0 cylinder replacements, 0 major component changes, magneto service at 320 hours routine, oil consumption within normal parameters throughout service life. Merrick set the report down. This contradicts fundamental engineering principles, he read. Excessive tolerances should produce excessive vibration. Rough surfaces should accelerate wear. Loose bearing clearances should cause oil pressure loss and premature failure. Yet engine performed reliably across documented service life, including combat operations, tropical conditions, and sustained high-power settings. The room was quiet, except for the distant sound of engines. "They don't understand why it works," Aldrich said. Merrick picked up the report again, flipped through several pages. They documented everything, took measurements accurate to a 10,000th of an inch, analyzed materials, examined manufacturing methods, and they're baffled. "Because they're asking the wrong question," Aldrich said. He walked back to his desk, sat down heavily. "They're asking, how can crude manufacturing produce reliable engines? The answer is, it can't. So they're confused." "What's the right question?" Aldrich looked at him. "Why did we deliberately design them this way?" Merrick sat back. "You're saying the loose tolerances are intentional. I'm saying I was in the room when we decided on those tolerances. 1939, R1830 production ramp-up planning. We knew exactly what we were doing." He opened his desk drawer, pulled out a folder thick with yellowed papers. Design meeting notes, 5 years old. The ink had faded, but the words remained clear. "October 1939, Aldrich said, reading from the first page. "Production requirements meeting. Target output 1,000 engines per month. Attendees 8 design engineers, 4 production engineers, 2 representatives from Army Air Corps procurement." He flipped pages, found what he was looking for. "Here, Walter Brennan, production chief. Quote, current tolerance specifications require precision machine tools available in approximately 12 facilities nationwide. To achieve target production, we need 50-plus facilities. We must open tolerances to enable standard machine shops to produce components to specification." Merrick leaned forward. "And you agreed?" "I fought it," Aldrich said, "for 3 meetings. Argued that opening tolerances would reduce engine life, increase failure rates, compromise performance." Brennan kept asking the same question. "What good is a perfect engine if we can only build 10 of them?" He found another page, read aloud. Final decision documented November 1939. Cylinder bore tolerance opened from plus or minus 0.003 inches to plus or minus 0.0015 inches. Bearing clearances increased by factor of 2. Surface finish requirements reduced from 32 microinch to 125 microinch. Design changes approved for implementation serial production to begin January 1940. "And it worked," Merrick said. "It worked," Aldrich confirmed. Failure rates went up slightly, 3%, maybe 4%. But production went up 300% in the first year. By 1942, we had 48 facilities making R1830 components. Ford in Detroit, Buick in Michigan, farm equipment manufacturers in Iowa, mining equipment companies in Pennsylvania. Every machine shop that could hold a tolerance of plus or minus 0.0015 inches was making parts for us. He closed the folder. "We designed for abundance, not perfection. The Japanese are looking at our engine and seeing imperfection. They're not seeing the system behind it." Merrick stood, walked to the window, watched aircraft moving on the flight line. "How many engines are we producing now?" 5,000 per month, Aldrich said. "All types combined. R1830, R2800, R3350. 5,000 engines leaving American factories every 30 days. And the Japanese." Aldrich pulled another document from his desk. "Intelligence estimate, updated monthly. Best estimate 300 engines per month. Declining. Their production is concentrated in 3 main facilities. Nagoya, Musashino, Shizuoka. February bombing raid hit Nagoya. Production down 35% nationwide." The implications hung in the air between them. "I need Fletcher," Aldrich said. "Get him up here." Merrick nodded and left. Sergeant Raymond Fletcher arrived 10 minutes later. 38 years old, master mechanic, 20 years working on engines from Model T Fords to Wright Cyclones. He had hands like catcher's mitts and a mind that understood machinery the way some men understood music. "Sir," Fletcher said, standing at attention more from habit than regulation. "At ease, Ray. Sit down." I need your experience. Fletcher sat carefully like he was worried the chair might not hold him. Aldrich pushed the Japanese report across the desk. Read page 12, the section on interchangeable parts. Fletcher read slowly, lips moving slightly. He had dropped out of school at 14 to work in his father's garage. Reading technical documents still took him effort, but his comprehension was flawless. He finished. Looked up. They're surprised the parts swap between engines. Correct, Aldrich said. They documented removing a cylinder from one R1830 and installing it in another R1830. No fitting required, no adjustments. Just bolted it on. They found this remarkable. Fletcher's weathered face showed something close to amusement. Sir, with respect, I've been swapping parts between engines since 1942. Cylinders, pistons, connecting rods, magnetos, carburetors. If the part number matches, it fits. That's the whole point. Explain that to me, Aldrich said. Like I don't know. Like I'm Japanese. Fletcher thought for a moment. Japanese probably hand-fit every part, he said. Match each piston to its specific cylinder. Balance each connecting rod to its specific crankshaft. That's what you do when you're building for perfection. Each engine becomes unique. Components matched, balanced, optimized. He paused. But that means you can't swap parts. Damaged cylinder. You can't just bolt on a replacement. You have to fit it, file it, measure it, balance everything again. Takes a skilled mechanic. Takes time. How much time? For a Japanese mechanic doing it their way, cylinder replacement, full refit and balance 20 hours, maybe more. Aldrich opened the maintenance manual sitting on his desk. Technical order 0225LC2. Maintenance instructions for R1830 engine. He turned to section 4.7. Our manual says 45 minutes. Fletcher nodded. That's about right, sir. I can do it in 30 if the engine's warm and I don't stop for coffee. Because the parts are already correct, Aldrich said. Yes, sir. We designed slop into the system. Those loose tolerances they're criticizing. That's what lets any cylinder fit any position. Any piston fit any cylinder. We sacrificed the last 5% of optimization to make everything interchangeable. Merrick had been listening quietly. Now he spoke. The Japanese built engines for craftsmen. We built engines for a system. Correct, Aldrich said. He pulled another document. This one was older Corner's worn coffee stain on the cover. Design Philosophy Guidelines, drafted 1938, updated 1939. He read aloud. Design Principle 4, Interchangeability. All components shall be manufactured to tolerances enabling installation without fitting or adjustment. Field replacement of damaged components must be possible by mechanics with basic training using standard tools. Design for the mechanic you have, not the mechanic you wish you had. He set the document down. That last line, that's the key. Design for the mechanic you have. Fletcher shifted in his chair. Sir, if you don't mind me saying, that's why it works. I've trained maybe 200 mechanics since 1942. Kids from farms, mostly. Factories, gas stations. We get them for 5 weeks. 5 weeks to teach them everything about radial engines. And, Aldrich prompted, and it works because the engine is designed to be simple. The manual tells them every step. Remove 6 bolts, lift cylinder straight up, check part number, install replacement, torque bolts to specification. The engine doesn't require genius, it requires following instructions. Aldrich turned back to the Japanese report, found the section on maintenance procedures. They criticize our manual. Quote, American maintenance documentation assumes mechanic has no expertise. Every procedure documented to elementary level. No allowance for craftsman judgment or interpretation. This indicates low confidence in maintenance personnel capabilities. Fletcher actually laughed. Short, sharp. Low confidence. No, sir, that's high confidence. I'm confident that a kid from Iowa who learned to fix tractors can maintain a radial engine if you tell him exactly what to do. I'm confident that simple procedures followed exactly beat complex procedures interpreted poorly. He leaned forward. Japanese train their mechanics for 2 years. 2 years. They learn metallurgy, thermodynamics, precision measurement. They become craftsmen. And I bet they're damn good at it. But, Aldrich said, but how many can they train 2-year program? Maybe they graduate 2,000 mechanics a year. We graduate 40,000. 5-week program, multiple training centers running constantly. We're producing mechanics faster than Japan can produce engines. The mathematics of attrition were brutal and clear. Aldrich stood. Walked to the wall where a map of the Pacific Theater hung. Red pins marked Japanese airfields. Blue pins marked American bases. The blue was advancing. The red was shrinking. They built a system dependent on irreplaceable expertise, he said quietly. Master mechanics, Skilled craftsmen. Each one takes years to train. When you kill one in a bombing raid, you lose years of accumulated knowledge. He turned to face Fletcher and Merrick. We built a system that doesn't need experts. Good enough mechanics. Replaceable. Train them in 5 weeks. If one gets killed, 3 more graduate the next week. The system continues. Merrick's voice was thoughtful. So, when the Japanese look at our engines and see crude manufacturing, they're actually seeing a completely different philosophy. One they don't have a framework to understand. Exactly, Aldrich said. They're measuring us by their standards. Precision, craftsmanship, individual excellence. By those standards we fail, but we're not playing their game. He picked up the report again, flipped to the end, the conclusion section, read it silently first, then aloud. American engine manufacturing represents systematic abandonment of precision engineering principles, yet operational results indicate reliability comparable or superior to Japanese standards. This apparent contradiction requires additional investigation. Current hypothesis. Americans have developed methods of compensating for manufacturing deficiencies through redundancy and robust design. Alternative hypothesis. American operational environment is less demanding than anticipated. Aldrich set it down. They're still trying to fit us into their framework, trying to explain how crude manufacturing produces reliable results. They're asking, what trick are the Americans using? They don't realize there's no trick. This is the design. The room fell quiet again. Outside, an engine test stand roared to life. Full throttle. The sound rattled the windows. It ran for 30 seconds, then throttled back to idle, then shut down. Testing sequence complete. They'd run 50 more before the day ended. Fletcher spoke carefully. Sir, permission to speak freely. Always Ray. That Japanese engineer who wrote this report. He's good. Really good. These measurements are excellent. The analysis is thorough. He understands engines. I agree, Aldrich said. Then he's going to figure it out, Fletcher said. Maybe not today, maybe not from this one report, but eventually he'll understand what we did. And when he does, he'll know they lost. Aldrich nodded slowly. He might already know, he said. Look at this. He turned to the final page of the report. At the bottom, separate from the main text, was a handwritten note. Pen, not pencil. Added later. The translation was marked as uncertain in places. Additional observation. Personal assessment. American design philosophy may represent fundamental departure from traditional engineering principles. Possibility exists that mass production requirements drove design methodology rather than design methodology enabling mass production. If correct implications are strategic rather than tactical, further analysis recommended, but may be irrelevant given current operational situation. Merrick read it over Aldrich's shoulder. Current operational situation. That's polite language for losing the war. Yes, Aldrich said. He closed the report, sat down at his desk. The morning sun was higher now, streaming through the window, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air like tiny aircraft. High Command wants a response, he said. 10 days to analyze their analysis. Determine if they've identified genuine weaknesses. Prepare counterintelligence assessment. What are you going to tell them? Merrick asked. Aldrich was quiet for a long moment. Then he opened his desk drawer, pulled out a fresh folder, took a fountain pen from his shirt pocket, unscrewed the cap. He wrote, Response to Japanese Technical Assessment, Preliminary Notes. Under that, the Japanese analysis is technically accurate. Our manufacturing is crude by precision standards, but they fundamentally misunderstand what they're looking at. He stopped writing, looked up at Fletcher and Merrick. I'm going to tell them the truth, he said. We designed these engines for the war we're actually fighting, with the workers we actually have, using the factories we actually built. The Japanese designed engines for the war they wanted to fight. Perfectly crafted machines maintained by master mechanics in pristine facilities. He capped the pen. We're going to win because we designed for reality. They're going to lose because they designed for ideals. Fletcher stood. Do you need anything else, sir? Yes, Aldrich said. I want production data. Monthly output for every facility making R1830 components, January through February 1944. And I want field reliability data. Every mechanical failure reported from Pacific Theatre last 6 months. Get it from maintenance records. I'll have it by tomorrow morning, Fletcher said. And Doug, Aldrich turned to Merrick. I want you to pull the original design files, everything from the 1939 meetings, all the documentation on why we chose these tolerances, meeting minutes, memoranda, engineering calculations. I need to show a clear paper trail proving this was deliberate design choice, not manufacturing incompetence. Understood, Merrick said. They left. Aldrich sat alone in his office. The report lay on his desk. 47 pages of meticulous analysis by an enemy engineer trying to understand American methods. He thought about that engineer, somewhere in Tokyo, or what was left of it after bombing raids. Probably older, experienced, dedicated to his craft. Taking an American engine apart piece by piece, measuring everything, trying to solve the mystery of how crude manufacturing produced reliable performance, missing the forest for the trees. The engine wasn't crude, it was designed. Every loose tolerance was a choice, every rough surface was a decision, every simplified procedure was intentional. They had looked at American industrial capacity in 1939 and asked, what can we actually build? Not what's the best possible engine, but what's the best engine we can make 5,000 of? Different question. Different answer. The Japanese asked, how perfect can we make this? The Americans asked, how many can we make? In 1939, sitting in conference rooms in Dayton, Ohio, American engineers had predicted this moment, not the specific details, but the broad reality. That war would be industrial. That victory would go to the side that could sustain production. That perfection was a luxury they couldn't afford. So they designed for abundance instead. Aldrich picked up his pen again. Continued writing. They see our engines as failures of craftsmanship. We see their engines as failures of system design. Both perspectives are valid from their own framework, but only one framework wins total wars. He paused, then added, the side that continues operating wins. Not the side with better equipment, the side that can replace losses faster than they accumulate. The side whose system survives damage. We didn't design the best engine. We designed the engine that keeps flying. Outside, another engine test started. The sound was familiar now, comforting. The sound of American industry. Not perfect, but continuous. Always continuous. That's what mattered. March 17th, 1944. 2 days after the report arrived. Aldrich had not slept well. His mind kept returning to that Japanese engineer. The man who had measured American tolerances to 4 decimal places and concluded they were crude. The man who had documented every surface finish, every casting mark, every weld that didn't meet his standards. The man who had written that final handwritten note, the one that suggested he understood more than his official report admitted. Fletcher arrived at 0730 hours carrying a box of file folders. Production data, he said, setting it on Aldrich's desk. Every facility, January through February, and the field reliability reports from Pacific maintenance depots. Aldrich opened the first folder. Columns of numbers. Engine serial numbers, flight hours, failure modes, replacement parts, time to repair. He scanned the data. Patterns emerged quickly. Mechanical failure rate 2.1 failures per 100 sorties. Most common failure magneto. Second most common oil pump. Actual engine failures, catastrophic loss requiring replacement 0.3 per 100 sorties. He pulled another document from Fletcher's box. Intelligence assessment. Captured from downed Japanese aircraft. Maintenance logs. Less complete than American records, but enough. Japanese mechanical failure rate, 4.3 failures per 100 sorties. Aldrich set both documents side by side. Ray, he said quietly. Their failure rate is twice ours. Fletcher nodded. Yes, sir. I noticed that too. But their engines are better. By every measurement of precision and craftsmanship, their engines are superior. Yes, sir. So why are they failing more often? Fletcher pulled up a chair, sat down heavily. I've been thinking about that, he said. 2 days now, turning it over in my mind. He picked up the Japanese failure report, scanned it. Look at the failure modes, sir. Bearing failures, oil system failures, valve train problems. Those are precision component failures, things that happen when tight tolerances get disrupted. Disrupted how? Heat, vibration, contamination, thermal expansion, all the things that happen in combat operations. Sir, a bearing designed to 0.005-inch clearance is perfect in ideal conditions. But introduce heat cycling metal expansion dust ingestion, that precision becomes a liability. Fletcher leaned forward. Our bearings have 0.002 to 0.004-inch clearance. Sloppy by their standards, but that slop absorbs thermal expansion, tolerates contamination, forgives abuse. The engine survives conditions that would seize a precision engine. Aldrich felt something click in his mind, a piece of the puzzle settling into place. We designed forgiveness into the system. Yes, sir. The Japanese designed perfection. We designed tolerance, for variation, for imperfect conditions, for mechanics who might not torque every bolt to exact specification. Merrick arrived carrying his own stack of files, design documentation from 1939. He spread them across the conference table. Found everything, he said. Design meeting minutes, engineering calculations, tolerance trade-off analyses. It's all documented. Aldrich walked to the table, started reading. The first document was dated October 12, 1939. Production requirements meeting. 8 pages of notes, handwritten, later typed. He read aloud. Walter Brennan, Production Chief. Gentlemen, we need to discuss reality. Army Air Corps projects demand for 15,000 aircraft engines per year by 1942. Current capacity, 3,000 per year. We need to quintuple production in 3 years. Next page. James Hartford, Design Engineer. Quintuple production requires precision machine tools we don't have. Germany has invested decades in precision manufacturing infrastructure. We haven't. We need to design around that limitation. Next page. A table. Columns showing tolerance specifications versus required machine tool precision versus number of available facilities. At tight tolerances, German-style Precision 12 facilities in America could produce to specification. At moderate tolerances, compromised but functional 50 facilities could produce to specification. At loose tolerances, the specifications they ultimately chose over 200 facilities could potentially contribute. The mathematics were brutal and clear. Precision meant bottleneck. Loose tolerances meant abundance. Here, Merrick said, pointing to another document. Design Philosophy Statement. Drafted November 1939. This is the foundational document. Aldrich read it, then read it again. Design Principles for High-Volume Production. 1. Interchangeability over optimization. All components must fit all assemblies without custom work. 2. Simplicity over sophistication. Reduce part count. Eliminate adjustments. Make assembly foolproof. 3. Tolerance for variation. Design must function across full range of manufacturing variation. No perfect condition assumptions. 4. Field replaceability. Any component failure must be repairable by moderately trained personnel using standard tools. 5. Distributed production. Design must be producible by multiple manufacturers using different equipment. No single-source dependencies. 6. Graceful degradation. Partial damage must not cause total failure. Engine must limp home. Merrick tapped the last line. Graceful degradation. That's the piece the Japanese don't see. Their engines are optimized. Ours are robust. When you damage an optimized system, it fails catastrophically. When you damage a robust system, it keeps functioning at reduced capacity. Aldrich remembered something. Pulled the Japanese report back out. Found the section he wanted. They documented this, he said. Listen. Field reports indicate American aircraft returning to base with visible battle damage, including damaged engines. Observation suggests American engines continue operating under conditions that should cause failure. Hypothesis unknown. Metallurgical properties or cooling system redundancy. They're seeing the effect, Merrick said, but attributing it to materials or cooling. They don't realize the whole design is built for damage tolerance. Fletcher spoke up. Sir, I've seen it in the field reports. B-17 comes back with 2 cylinders shot out. Engines still running, making power on 12 cylinders instead of 14. Rough as hell but flying. Japanese engine takes that kind of damage, it seizes. Oil pressure drops, bearing failure done. Because their tight tolerances don't forgive imbalance, Aldrich said. Lose 2 cylinders and the vibration destroys precision bearings. Our loose clearances absorb the vibration. He walked back to the window. Another aircraft was taxiing. P-47 Thunderbolt. R-2800 engine. 18 cylinders. 2,000 horsepower. Built using the same philosophy as the R-1830. Loose tolerances. Interchangeable parts. Designed for abundance. We need to document this for the Pentagon, he said. Show them it's not accident or incompetence. It's systematic design philosophy developed before the war started. They need to understand what they're defending. Over the next week, they built the case. Fletcher compiled maintenance data from every Pacific Theater maintenance depot. Charts showing mean time between failure, graphs showing repair times, tables comparing American and Japanese reliability. The data was overwhelming. American engines failed less often and got repaired faster. Not despite loose tolerances, because of loose tolerances. Merrick assembled the design history. Every meeting minute, every engineering calculation, every trade-off analysis. The paper trail proved deliberate intent. Aldrich synthesized it into a report. March 24th, 1944. He finished the final draft at 0200 hours. Couldn't sleep anyway. Might as well work. The report was 63 pages. Technical appendices added another 40. He titled it Analysis of Japanese Technical Assessment of American Engine Manufacturing Methods. The executive summary was 3 pages. He wrote it carefully. This would be read by generals who understood strategy but not engineering. It needed to be clear. He wrote, "The Japanese analysis is technically accurate but strategically meaningless. They correctly identify that American manufacturing uses looser tolerances, rougher finishes, and less precision than Japanese methods. They incorrectly conclude this represents manufacturing deficiency. In reality, these characteristics represent deliberate design choices made in 1939 to enable mass production using American industrial capacity. We designed engines that America could build, not engines that achieved maximum theoretical performance. This approach yields 3 strategic advantages. First, distributed production. Our engines can be manufactured by 200+ facilities using standard machine tools. Japanese engines require specialized facilities. We have redundancy. They have vulnerability. Second, rapid field repair. Our engines use interchangeable parts and simple procedures. Average repair time 4.2 hours. Japanese engines require custom fitting and expert mechanics. Estimated repair time 20+ hours. We return aircraft to service 5 times faster. Third, graceful degradation. Our engines tolerate damage and continue operating. Japanese engines optimized for perfect conditions fail catastrophically under stress. Our aircraft come home. Theirs don't. The Japanese built better engines. We built a better system. The system is winning." He paused, added 1 more paragraph. "Japanese engineers are not inferior. Their analysis is sophisticated and their measurements are excellent, but they are measuring us by their values, precision craftsmanship, individual excellence. They cannot see that we optimized for different values, abundance, replaceability, systemic resilience. They are losing the war, not because their engineers are worse, but because their engineering philosophy cannot scale to total war. Perfection doesn't scale. Good enough scales." Aldrich signed it, dated it, put it in the classified envelope for Washington. Then he did something unusual. He wrote a second document, personal, not part of the official report. He titled it Notes on Industrial Philosophy. He wrote, "I keep thinking about that Japanese engineer, the one who measured our engine so carefully, who documented every imperfection, who tried to understand how crude manufacturing produced reliable results. I think he knows. That final handwritten note suggests awareness beyond his official conclusions. He sees that we're playing a different game. But knowing doesn't help him. His system can't change. Too much invested in precision manufacturing, too many craftsmen trained in traditional methods, too much cultural emphasis on perfection. You can't retool an entire nation's industrial philosophy in the middle of a war. We're winning because we asked different questions in 1939. We asked, what can America actually build? Not what's theoretically optimal. We designed for our strengths, abundant raw materials, massive industrial capacity, pragmatic workforce, systematic organization. The Japanese designed for their strengths skilled craftsmen, attention to detail, pursuit of perfection. Different strengths, different designs. But total war favors abundance over perfection. Always has, always will. The side that continues operating wins, not the side with better equipment, the side that can absorb losses and keep fighting, the side whose system survives chaos. We didn't build the best engines, we built the engines that keep flying." He filed this document in his personal drawer, not for Washington, for himself, maybe for history eventually. April 3rd, 1944. Response came back from Pentagon. Brief memo. Typed on official stationery. Classification secret. Lieutenant Colonel Aldrich. Your analysis received and reviewed. Conclusions concur with strategic assessment. Japanese technical capability remains high but systemically constrained. American production advantages confirmed and expanding. Continue monitoring enemy technical intelligence. No changes to current production methodology required. Well done. Signed by a brigadier general whose name Aldrich didn't recognize. He showed it to Merrick and Fletcher. "That's it," Merrick said. 63 pages, and we get 3 paragraphs. "That's the military," Fletcher said. "If they're not changing anything, they're satisfied." But Aldrich understood. The Pentagon didn't need convincing. They already knew American production was winning. They just needed confirmation that the Japanese criticism didn't reveal hidden weakness. It didn't. It revealed hidden strength. The Japanese saw crude manufacturing. They missed the sophisticated system design that made crude manufacturing work. That afternoon, Aldrich received another document. Intelligence report. New information from Pacific Theater. Japanese aircraft production was collapsing. Not just declining. Collapsing. March 1944 figures, 187 aircraft engines completed, down from 340 in January, down from 580 in October 1943.
caused bombing raids targeting Nagoya facilities, submarine blockade cutting raw material imports, skilled worker casualties, machine tool shortages. The centralized precision-dependent system was brittle, removed key nodes and the whole network failed. American production in March 5, 230 aircraft engines, up from 4,090 in February, up from 420 in January. The distributed tolerance-forgiving system was resilient. Bomb one factory and 47 others increased output. Aldrich pulled out a map, marked every facility producing R1830 components. The pins covered half the country: Midwest, Northeast,
South, West Coast. You couldn't bomb them all, couldn't blockade them, couldn't disrupt the network enough to stop production. That was the point. That was the design. He thought about the Japanese engineer again, the man in Tokyo with his micrometers and his careful measurements, discovering that American engines violated every principle he'd been taught, and slowly perhaps realizing what it meant, that engineering excellence wasn't enough, that craftsmanship couldn't compete with industrial systems, that perfection was a luxury his nation couldn't afford. Fletcher knocked, entered. "Sir, got something you should see." He handed Aldrich a folder. Intelligence intercept. Translated radio communication from Japanese naval base. Technical discussion between engineers. The translation was rough, but readable. American engine analysis complete. Recommend no changes to Japanese design methods. American approach unsuitable for our manufacturing capacity and cultural methods. However, note that American production rate continues to increase while ours declines. Strategic implications concerning request guidance on alternative approaches to air power sustainability. The message ended there. No response documented. Aldrich read it twice. "They know," he said quietly. "They understand the problem, but they can't solve it." "Why not?" Fletcher asked. "Because the solution requires abandoning everything they built their system on. You can't suddenly train 5-week mechanics when you've spent decades developing 2-year training programs. Can't suddenly accept loose tolerances when your entire manufacturing culture values precision. Can't suddenly distribute production across automotive plants when your factories are specialized and your craftsmen are concentrated." He set the intercept down. "They're locked in, path-dependent. Their choices in the 1920s and 1930s determined what's possible now. They optimized for quality. We optimized for quantity. In peacetime, quality wins. In total war, quantity wins." Merrick had been listening from the doorway. "So they just keep building the same way, even knowing it's not enough. What choice do they have?" Aldrich said. "Stop building precision engines and build crude ones. They don't have the machine tools for high-volume, loose-tolerance work, don't have the training programs for simplified maintenance, don't have the manuals for non-expert mechanics, don't have the culture that accepts good enough. They could start now, retool, adapt. How long would that take? 3 years, 5? The war will be over. They needed to make these choices in 1939. We did. They didn't." Fletcher spoke thoughtfully. "So we're winning because of decisions made before the shooting started?" "Yes," Aldrich said. "Wars are won by logistics and production. Strategy and tactics matter at the margins, but the foundation is industrial capacity. And industrial capacity is determined by choices made years before the war begins." He looked at the map again. All those pins, all those factories, all those workers making parts that fit together without custom work. All those mechanics trained in 5 weeks to maintain engines designed for simplicity. The system. Not genius, not heroism, not technological breakthrough, just systematic application of pragmatic principles. Design for abundance. Accept imperfection. Prioritize continuation over optimization. The Japanese engineer had measured it all, had documented the imperfections, had tried to understand the mystery. But there was no mystery, just a different philosophy, one that worked, one that scaled, one that won. May 1944. The report was filed away. Aldrich returned to regular duties, designing improvements to the R2800, troubleshooting production issues, consulting on new projects. But he kept thinking about it. The conversation between two engineering philosophies that never actually met. Americans designing for reality, Japanese measuring the results and not understanding the intent. 2 nations, 2 approaches, 2 outcomes. One seeking perfection, one seeking sufficiency. In peacetime, perfection would have won. Better engines, more efficient, more refined, superior in every measurable way. But this wasn't peacetime. And in war, sufficient beat perfect. Every time. Because sufficient could be mass-produced. Perfect couldn't. Sufficient could be maintained by farm kids. Perfect required master craftsmen. Sufficient could be distributed across 200 factories. Perfect required specialized facilities. Sufficient survived damage. Perfect died. The Japanese built engines like art. Americans built engines like bread. The hungry army ate. The starving army admired craftsmanship while it died. Aldrich understood this now more clearly than ever, not just intellectually. Viscerally. American pragmatism wasn't crude. It was sophisticated in different ways. The sophistication of systems thinking, of accepting human limitations and designing around them, of understanding that complexity was a luxury and simplicity was a necessity. The Japanese report sat in his files. Classified. 47 pages of meticulous analysis that missed the point entirely while simultaneously proving it. He thought that Japanese engineer would make a good colleague in a different world. They could argue about tolerances over coffee, compare design philosophies, learn from each other. In this world, they were enemies, and one philosophy was destroying the other, not because one was better in absolute terms, because one matched the war being fought. That was the lesson, the one the Japanese engineer had glimpsed in his handwritten note but couldn't act on. Match your design to your reality, not to your ideals. America's reality was abundant resources, massive industrial base, and pragmatic workforce. Japan's reality was limited resources, specialized facilities, and craft tradition. America designed for its reality. Japan designed for its ideals. And reality always wins. Always. The war would prove it conclusively, but the proof was already visible in March 1944 to anyone who could read production figures and failure rates. The crude engines were winning, the perfect engines were losing, and there was nothing crude about why. June 6, 1944. D-Day. Aldrich stood in the operations room at Wright Field watching teletype reports come in from England. Thousands of aircraft supporting the invasion. Bombers, fighters, transports, gliders. The largest air operation in history. And behind every aircraft an engine. Thousands of engines, built in Detroit and Michigan and Ohio and Pennsylvania. Maintained by mechanics trained in 5 weeks, using parts that fit without custom work. The system at full scale. Fletcher entered carrying a clipboard. Early casualty reports, not deaths. Mechanical casualties. Initial figures from 8th Air Force, he said. 12 400 aircraft sorties in first 24 hours. Mechanical abort rate 1.9%. That's 236 aircraft returning to base with engine problems. And, Aldrich asked, and as of 1800 hours yesterday, 89 of them are already back in service. Parts swapped, engines replaced. 72-hour maintenance backlog cleared in under 30 hours. Aldrich did the math. 80% back in service in a day and a half. That shouldn't be possible, he said quietly. It's possible because the engines are designed for it, Fletcher said. Standard parts, simple procedures. Mechanics who know exactly what to do because the manual tells them exactly what to do. Another teletype chattered to life. Operations summary from 9th Air Force. Similar figures. Low mechanical failure rate. Rapid repairs. High sortie rate sustained. The system was working. At scale. Under pressure. In combat. Everything they had designed in 1939 was proving itself on the most consequential day of the war. Merrick arrived with another report. This one was different. Intelligence assessment. Luftwaffe status. German air opposition weaker than anticipated, he read. Estimated serviceable aircraft 300 fighters over invasion area. Intelligence suggests significant portion of Luftwaffe inventory grounded for maintenance or lack of spare parts. Aldrich took the report, read it fully. The Germans had superior aircraft, Me-109, Fw-190, jets in development, technologically advanced, powerful, fast, but they couldn't keep them flying. Centralized production, precision manufacturing, specialized parts, expert mechanics, the same system as Japan, the same vulnerabilities. Allied bombing had disrupted it. Not destroyed it completely, just disrupted it enough. A few key factories damaged. Supply chains interrupted. Skilled workers killed or diverted. The brittle system cracked. Meanwhile, American production continued, expanded even. Bomber factory in Detroit and production shifted to Buick in Michigan. Submarine attacks didn't matter when raw materials came from within your own borders. The resilient system adapted. They're fighting the same war Japan is fighting, Aldrich said, trying to maintain precision systems in chaotic conditions. It doesn't work. July 1944. More reports arrived daily. Pacific Theater aircraft availability. American forces maintaining 73% of inventory in serviceable condition. Japanese estimated at 41% serviceable.
Not because American aircraft were more reliable, because American logistics were faster. Part breaks. American mechanic pulls replacement from supply. Part number matches. Bolts it on. 4 hours later, aircraft is flying. Part breaks on Japanese aircraft. Mechanic requests replacement.
Part must be manufactured or hand-fitted. 2 weeks later, maybe aircraft is flying. Probably not. Attrition wasn't just combat losses. Attrition was aircraft sitting on the ground waiting for parts that never came. The crude engines kept flying. The perfect engines sat idle. August 1944. Aldrich received another intercepted Japanese document. Technical directive from Japanese Navy Aviation Command. Desperate tone. Instructions to field mechanics on improvising repairs, adapting parts from different engine types, loosening tolerance requirements when proper parts unavailable. They were trying to adopt American methods, in the field, under pressure, without the design foundation to support it. It wasn't working. You couldn't improvise interchangeability. Either the parts were designed to swap, or they weren't. Japanese parts weren't. Forcing them to fit meant compromising structural integrity. Engines failed. They were learning the wrong lesson. They saw American mechanics swapping parts and thought it was about field improvisation. It wasn't. It was about factory precision of a different kind. Precision in standardization rather than precision in optimization. Every American cylinder was made to the same loose tolerance. That consistency enabled interchangeability. Japanese cylinders were made to tight tolerances, but each was unique. You couldn't swap them no matter how skilled the mechanic. The system had to be designed from the beginning. You couldn't retrofit it into an existing design philosophy. September 1944. Aldrich was called to Washington. Pentagon briefing. His report had circulated to higher levels. They wanted his perspective on post-war planning. He sat in a conference room with 3 generals, 2 admirals, and a dozen staff officers. A colonel presented current production figures. American aircraft engine production 700 units per month. German production estimated 800 per month and falling. Japanese production estimated 140 per month and collapsing. 10-1 advantage against Germany, 50-1 against Japan. The question, a general said looking at Aldrich, is whether this advantage is sustainable post-war. Can American methods compete in peacetime markets? Aldrich considered carefully before answering. The methods will dominate, he said, but the philosophy needs adaptation. Explain? In wartime, quantity beats quality because attrition consumes everything. In peacetime, markets demand both quantity and quality. The German and Japanese approach perfect products in small numbers works for luxury markets. Our approach good products in large numbers works for mass markets. He paused. But there's a synthesis possible. Use our production methods, interchangeable parts, simple assembly, distributed manufacturing, but tighten tolerances slightly, improve finishes, add quality control. You get mass-produced precision, not as perfect as handcrafted, but much better than crude and scalable. One of the admirals spoke. You're describing peacetime application of wartime lessons? Yes, sir. The Japanese and Germans will learn these lessons too, after the war. They'll have to. You can't compete in global markets with craft production methods. Too expensive, too slow, but they'll bring their cultural emphasis on quality to mass production methods. That combination will be formidable. Another general frowned. You're saying our enemies will become our competitors? Yes, sir, and they'll be good at it. They have the discipline, the attention to detail, the cultural values that support quality. When they apply those values to mass production systems, they'll be very competitive. The room was quiet. But that's decades away, Aldrich added. Right now, we're winning because we asked the right question in 1939. We asked, what can America build? They asked, what's perfect? Different questions, different outcomes. The briefing continued for 2 hours. Strategic implications, industrial policy, post-war planning. But Aldrich's mind kept returning to that Japanese engineer, the one who had measured American engines so carefully, who had documented the imperfections, who had written that final note suggesting he understood more than he could officially admit. Was he still alive? Tokyo had been bombed repeatedly, facilities destroyed, people killed. Maybe the engineer survived. Maybe he was still working, still trying to maintain Japanese production with dwindling resources and damaged facilities, still building perfect engines that couldn't be built fast enough, understanding the problem but unable to solve it. March 1945. The war in Europe was ending, Germany collapsing, production completely disrupted. The final tally was becoming clear. America had produced 324,000 aircraft engines during the war, all types, all purposes. Germany had produced 119,000. Japan had produced 88,000. America alone had outproduced both enemies combined by a factor of 3. Not because American engineers were better, because American systems were better. Fletcher brought the final analysis to Aldrich's office. Reliability data, complete war record. American aircraft lost to mechanical failure, 18-344. German aircraft lost to mechanical failure, 31-200. Japanese aircraft lost to mechanical failure, 35-800. The perfect engines failed more often than the crude engines, not in laboratory conditions, in war. The irony, Fletcher said, is that our engines were more reliable precisely because they were less precise. Not less precise, Aldrich corrected. Precisely imprecise. We were very precise about how much imprecision to allow. That's different than being sloppy. Fletcher nodded. Controlled tolerance versus uncontrolled excellence. Exactly. May 8, 1945. Germany surrendered. August 15, 1945. Japan surrendered. The war was over.
Aldrich stood in his office at Wright Field. 5.5 years since those design meetings in 1939. Years of war, of production, of proving that pragmatism beat idealism. He pulled out the Japanese report, the one from December 1943, read it again with the hindsight of victory. The measurements were still accurate, the analysis still sophisticated, the conclusions still wrong. But that handwritten note at the end, he read it again. American design philosophy may represent fundamental departure from traditional engineering principles. Implications are strategic rather than tactical. Further analysis recommended, but may be irrelevant given current operational situation. May be irrelevant given current operational situation. The engineer had known. In December 1943, he had known Japan was losing, that the war was decided, that understanding American methods wouldn't change the outcome because Japan couldn't adopt them. Path dependency.
Historical choices, constraining present options. Japan had chosen craft production in the 1920s. That choice determined what was possible in the 1940s. America had chosen mass production in the 1920s. That choice won the war. October 1945. Aldrich was sent to Japan. Occupation duty, technical assessment of Japanese facilities. He arrived in Tokyo. The city was devastated. Bombing had destroyed vast areas. The technical research facility where the Japanese engineer had worked was rubble, but some records survived, stored in reinforced basements, protected from fire. American intelligence teams were cataloguing everything: technical documents, research papers, design specifications. Aldrich requested access to aircraft engine research files. They brought him boxes of documents, charred at the edges, water-damaged, but readable. He found the original Japanese report, the one he'd read in translation. Seeing it in Japanese, even though he couldn't read the language, was strange. This document had crossed the Pacific, had been translated, had shaped his understanding. He found other reports too. Follow-ups. The Japanese engineers had continued analyzing captured American equipment throughout the war. One report from July 1944 caught his attention. The translator's summary was attached. Analysis of maintenance procedures observed at captured American airfield Saipan. American mechanics perform engine replacement in 4 hours 17 minutes using 3-man crew. Japanese equivalent procedure requires minimum 3 days with 5-man crew of specialists. American advantage in field maintenance confirmed as systematic rather than circumstantial. Recommendation: develop simplified maintenance procedures for future aircraft designs. Note: implementation impossible during current conflict due to existing inventory and training limitations. Recommendation impossible to implement. They'd understood, but understanding didn't help.
Aldrich asked the intelligence officer if any of the Japanese engineers were available for interview.
"Some survived," the officer said. "Most facilities were destroyed, but some engineers made it through. We've been debriefing them on technical matters. I'd like to speak with someone who worked on aircraft engines, specifically someone who analyzed captured American equipment." The officer checked his lists. "There's one. Senior engineer. Worked at the Tokyo research facility. Name is..." He checked the transliteration. "Nakamura. Hiroshi Nakamura. He's consulting for occupation forces now, helping us understand Japanese production methods." Aldrich felt something tighten in his chest. "Can you arrange a meeting, November 1945? They met in a requisitioned office building in Tokyo. Nakamura was 47 years old, thin, tired, but his eyes were sharp, intelligent. A translator was present, but Nakamura spoke some English, enough for technical discussion. They sat across a table. 2 engineers, former enemies. "You wrote the report," Aldrich said. "December 1943, analysis of the R-1830 engine." Nakamura nodded slowly. "Yes, I wrote it. It was very thorough. Your measurements were excellent. Thank you."
Nakamura's voice was quiet, formal. But my conclusions were incomplete. You understood more than you wrote? A pause. Then Nakamura nodded again. I understood that you had built a different kind of system. Not better engines, better system for engines, for production, for maintenance, for war. Why didn't you say that in the report? Nakamura looked down at his hands, scarred from years of technical work, similar to Aldrich's hands. I said what I could say, in official report, but I knew, even then, we had already lost. Not the battles, the industrial war. You could make many. We could make few. You could repair fast. We could repair slow. You could lose factories and continue. We could not. His English was halting but clear. I wrote, at end, my personal thought, that your philosophy was strategic, not tactical. I knew what it meant. Did anyone listen? Nakamura smiled sadly. Some listened, but listening does not matter when you cannot change. Our system was built over decades. How to make it different in middle of war impossible. Aldrich pulled out a folder. Inside was a copy of his own report. The response to Nakamura's analysis. I wrote a response, he said, to your report, explaining our philosophy, why we designed the engines the way we did. He slid it across the table. Nakamura took it, read slowly. His English reading was better than his speaking. He took 10 minutes to go through the executive summary. When he finished, he looked up. You designed for your reality, he said. We designed for our ideals. Yes, and reality wins. Always. Nakamura was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke again, choosing his words carefully. American pragmatism. I did not understand it before war. In Japan, we value perfection, craftsmanship, every detail correct. But you value what works, what scales, what continues. Not perfect, but sufficient. And sufficient multiplied becomes superior. It's not that we don't value quality, Aldrich said. It's that we define quality differently. Quality means, does it do the job? Can we make enough? Can anyone maintain it? Will it keep working under bad conditions? Those are quality measures too. Yes, Nakamura said. Different quality. System quality, not component quality. They talked for 2 hours, comparing philosophies, discussing design choices. 2 engineers finally able to have the conversation their governments had fought a war to prevent. At the end, Nakamura said something that stayed with Aldrich forever. After war, Nakamura said, Japan must rebuild. We will learn from this, American mass production methods, but we will add Japanese attention to detail. We will make mass-produced precision, not crude. Not perfect, but both together. It will take many years, but we will learn. Aldrich believed him. You'll be competitors again, he said, in peacetime markets. Yes, Nakamura said, but this time we understand the lesson. Scale matters, systems matter. You cannot win with perfection alone. You need perfection that scales. They shook hands. 2 engineers, former enemies, future colleagues in the global industrial economy that would emerge from the war. December 1945. Aldrich returned to Ohio, back to Wright Field. The war was over, but work continued. New designs, jet engines, turboprops, the future of aviation. But he kept that meeting in his mind, the conversation with Nakamura, the mutual understanding between engineers who had been on opposite sides. They had both been right in their own contexts. Japanese perfectionism was right for craft production, luxury markets, specialized applications. American pragmatism was right for mass markets, mass production, total war. The war had been a contest between philosophies as much as between nations, and one philosophy had proven itself superior for industrial warfare. But Nakamura was right too. The post-war world would need synthesis, mass production with quality, scale with precision, American methods with Japanese attention to detail. That would take decades to develop. But it would happen. January 1946. Aldrich wrote one final document. Not a report, a reflection, for his own records. He titled it, Lessons from the Engine. He wrote, the Japanese engineer who analyzed our R1830 engine in December 1943 taught me something important. He showed me that 2 groups of intelligent, dedicated people can look at the same object and see completely different things. He saw imperfection. I saw pragmatic design. He saw crude manufacturing. I saw scaled production. He saw low quality. I saw system resilience. Both perspectives were valid. Both came from sophisticated engineering understanding. But one matched the requirements of total war, and one didn't. The lesson isn't that American methods are always superior.
It's that methods must match context. In peacetime luxury markets, Japanese methods would win. Handcrafted perfection, meticulous attention to detail, premium pricing for premium products. In total war, American methods won. Good enough quality, massive quantity, brutal attrition favoring the side that continues operating. The key is knowing which context you're in and designing accordingly. Japan designed for the war they wanted to fight. Samurai tradition, individual excellence, quality over quantity. America designed for the war we had to fight. Industrial attrition, mass mobilization, quantity enabling quality. We won because our philosophy matched our reality. That Japanese engineer understood this. I'm certain of it. His handwritten note proved his awareness. But understanding didn't help. His nation was committed to a different path.
Historical choices constrained present options. The tragedy isn't that one side was stupid or wrong. The tragedy is that intelligent people on both sides were locked into systems that determined outcomes before the fighting began. The war was won by decisions made in the 1930s, by industrial policies, by manufacturing philosophies, by choices about how to organize production. The fighting just revealed what had already been decided. That's the lesson from the engine. The crude American engine that confused Japanese engineers. It wasn't crude, it was designed. Every loose tolerance was a choice. Every rough surface was intentional. Every simplified procedure was systematic. And it worked. It scaled. It won. Not because Americans were smarter, because we asked different questions. Not what's perfect, but what's sufficient. Not what's optimal, but what's scalable. Different questions, different answers, different outcomes. The Japanese engineer measured our engine and found it wanting by his standards. He was right. By his standards, it was inferior. But we weren't building to his standards. We were building to win a war. And we did. Aldrich signed it, dated it, filed it away. The engine that had started this journey that R-1830 disassembled in Tokyo in December 1943 was gone, destroyed or scrapped or lost in the chaos of war. But the lesson remained. Philosophy matters. Context matters. Asking the right questions matters. The Japanese built engines like art. Americans built engines like bread. And the hungry army always wins. Always. 30 years later, in the 1970s, American automotive executives would discover that Japanese manufacturers had learned the lesson, had synthesized American mass production with Japanese quality culture, had created something neither side had achieved alone. But that's a different story. This story ends in 1946, with two engineers on opposite sides of a war.
Both brilliant, both dedicated, both shaped by their contexts and constrained by their histories. One wrote a report analyzing crude American manufacturing. The other wrote a response explaining systematic American philosophy. They never met until after the war ended. But their conversation, mediated by documents and translations and intelligence reports, captured something essential about industrial conflict. That victory doesn't go to the best equipment, it goes to the best system. That individual excellence loses to organized sufficiency. That perfection is a luxury. Continuation is a necessity. And in war, necessity always defeats luxury. The engine proved it. The crude engine that kept flying, that got repaired in hours, that could be built by thousands, that tolerated damage and kept running. The engine that won the war, not because it was better, because it was sufficient. And sufficient multiplied becomes overwhelming. That's the philosophy in the wreckage. The lesson hidden in loose tolerances and rough surfaces and interchangeable parts. The lesson that Thornton Aldrich defended and Hiroshi Nakamura discovered. The lesson that won the war.